Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Piers. This is a Ukraine war news update, the second part thereof for the 31st of spooky October 2025. I normally do carved pumpkins, and I've got a great repertoire of really cool pumpkins over the years, but I just forgot to buy pumpkins this year. So I'm not going to be doing it for the first year in ages, and that's a little bit of a letdown. I just really realized that. Anyway, please like, subscribe, and share. That would be absolutely fabulous. That's my obligation to say that as a YouTuber. That would be really fantastic. Right, let's get into looking at what the news is regarding weaponry and armaments and aid going to Ukraine and what's being developed in Russia as well. Okay, so we're going to start with the US Permanent Representative to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, has said that the US plans to sell Europe $2 billion in weapons in the coming months for transfer to Ukraine. And I presume this is stuff that's already been kind of agreed upon. I assume he can't just pull that number out of his posterior. So that must be European nations having agreed to sales in principle, and then that money will come through and there'll be delivery. So that's really good news in terms of Ukraine getting what it needs. Of course, the thanks there go to the nations that are actually spending that money being out of pocket to help Ukraine, less so the Americans who are just selling that stuff. Now, a lot of talk has been there's been a lot of talk about the planes that are going to Ukraine. The F-16s obviously having been delivered already and are in the process of being delivered from different nations such as Belgium. Then we have the Gripens that are going to be delivered from 2026 onwards. Initially, the Gripen CD variants, as I've discussed, and then the Gripen E's hot off the press, hot off the production lines. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. In fact, let's bring that in now. So before we get to that, since I've mentioned Gripens, the E variants are going to come after, well, in 3 years' time. But what Sweden, what Saab really need is an expanded production line. So hopefully those Gripens can get to Ukraine sooner than that. And of course, as Gripens are now on everyone's lips in terms of, they're getting free press, aren't they? They're getting free advertising, free marketing, the Saab lot. So they are possibly going to take orders from elsewhere. One of the nations they're looking for orders from is Canada. As I mentioned the other day, the Canadians are obliged to buy, I think, 18 F-35s from the Americans, but they were going to buy, I think, 88. And now the trade negotiations have failed between two nations, and Trump appears to be trying to attack Canada, certainly rhetorically and with trade, but arguably wants it to be the 51st state of America. The Canadians are looking at, I guess, punishing the Americans and getting closer to Europe. And one way they can do that is to buy stuff from Europe rather than from the United States. And Saab are onto this. So if Canada buys Saab aircraft rather than F-35, then there's a sweetener of being able to build those aircraft in Canada. They already do this in Brazil, and they're ramping up production in Brazil and Sweden to fulfill the orders for both Sweden and Ukraine. And I don't know what other nations are going to be buying them or continuing to buy them. We know that Brazil has Gripens, and I think, does Hungary have Gripens as well as Thailand as well? Well, if the Canadians take these Gripens on rather than the F-35, then the sweetener is that they get to make them in Canada, perhaps. So the Swedish defense company Saab is considering Canada as a potential location to assemble Gripen fighter jets. The decision is linked to growing demand from Ukraine. The company is looking for ways to expand production capacity both in Canada and in Europe. So that would help out Ukraine as well if that takes place. Anyway, the third element here is Dassault's Rafale fighter jet, which is a French one. It's more expensive than the Gripen I don't know about your flyaway costs, but certainly the Gripens have a much cheaper maintenance and operation cost than these other jets. So Ukraine is in talks with France, Sweden, and the US to build a 250 jet air force Dassault confirms it's ready to supply Rafale fighters, though Sweden's Gripen leads due to cost training and flexibility. But Rafale are in the mix. Journal du Dimanche, Sunday Journal, a French media outlet, has received confirmation from a Dassault aviation source that discussions are underway between France and Ukraine regarding the potential acquisition of Rafale fighter jets by the Ukrainian Air Force in the future. Now, what there is already in place is a training schedule process for pilots that go, first of all, to the UK to get your basic flight training on prop planes, learning about meteorology and whatnot. Then they go to France to learn on training jets. And then they can fly Mirage or go to the F-16, I presume, from there. But France is involved very much in the jet training. And they are getting a few more Mirages at the moment. I think 3 more certainly are imminent from France, Mirage 2005Fs, to add to the 5 that they've given. One of those has been lost due to a mechanical failure. But Rafales would make sense because there is a process there whereby France is training Ukrainian pilots. Anyway, the discussions are underway between France and Ukraine regarding the potential acquisition of the Rafale jets for the Ukrainian Air Force. Dassault Aviation has stated that it is ready to respond to a potential Ukrainian request. It should be noted that the Élysée Palace had previously considered supplying Ukraine with Rafale fighters, but this option was rejected by the Ministry of Armed Forces. So originally they didn't want too many airframes. It's a bit like, the number of different tanks, the number of different infantry fighting vehicles and APCs that Ukraine and artillery pieces that Ukraine is utilizing at the moment makes it an absolute freaking nightmare for maintenance. They have to have so many different maintenance chains, supply chains for parts and for fixing and maintaining these bits of kit, that it is a massive headache for the Ukrainians. They really need to scale down the number of different items that they use. But of course, beggars can't be choosers. So they really need to get as much stuff as possible as well to use on a battlefield. So they're having to overcome these maintenance challenges. But that was the same with airplanes. They wanted to just make sure that they were focusing on F-16s initially, and then as it looked like, F-16s that were due to come from Denmark, I think it was, that then were had to go because the Americans demanded it was so, had to go instead of going to Ukraine to Brazil to stop the Brazilians buying Chinese planes. So the Americans were big on staving off Chinese influence in Argentina. And so, Argentina were going to buy Chinese planes, and now they had these Danish F-16s ordered by the Americans. So there's now this hole for F-16s that they were going to receive and they're not obviously going to get. So luckily, a few more Mirage 5Fs and then Gripens are coming in. And I guess at a later date, Rafales. It should be noted that the Élysée Palace had previously considered them, but it was rejected. Now, Le Parisien claims that the delivery of Dassault Aviation's Rafale aircraft to the Ukrainian Air Force would be financed by NATO's Pearl assistance program. So this is the program that gets money from NATO countries to the US to buy equipment. Or they could use the same mechanism, it appears, to buy things off, in this case, France, without confirming the information. So it's not been confirmed from Le Parisien, but that is the claim there. I'd imagine there's quite a waiting list on Rafale because India used them, and I think they put in another massive order for Rafales. Anyway, that is something to keep an eye on for sure. Now, French defense company Alta Aries, in collaboration with Ukrainian engineers, has launched mass production of interceptor drones in France. These AI-powered systems are designed to counter guided bombs and aerial threats. We heard about other, I presume there are other projects ongoing with German and French. This might be one of the French ones, but I think there are multiple options, perhaps from allied nations. Anyway, plans are also in place to localize parts of the production in Ukraine for these interceptor drones for guided glide bombs. Now, a quote, this is French aid to Ukraine again. So French company Alta Ares is set to launch large-scale production of long-range interceptor drones on the 30th of October, so that's yesterday. Designed to counter Shahed drones, including Russian jet-powered models, the new systems are destined to reinforce defenses on NATO's eastern flank. So here the focus is on these being used to intercept Shahed drones, but the claim is also that they might be able to take out guided glide bombs. I don't know if how accurate that is. I mean, guided glide bombs, interceptor drones against them, that'd be really difficult, I would have thought, to take down guided glide bombs, but who knows? French Aid Ukraine here says, starting on the 30th of October, Alta Ares will begin mass production of the X-Wing interceptor, one of the 2 interceptor drones at a French manufacturing site, the location of which is confidential. The vertical takeoff and landing VTOL drone is designed to intercept Russian mid-range conventional propulsion kamikaze drones, namely in theaters where conventional launches are complicated. The VTOL was developed in partnership with the Ukrainian startup. Another interceptor remains in the prototype stage, the Blackbird, which is equipped with a turbojet engine and can see for long-range interception of fast-moving targets, including the latest versions of the Guran 5 jet-powered drones coming out of Russian mass production site in Yelabuga, Tatarstan. Alta Ares has indicated the Blackbird will soon be tested in Ukraine. Both interceptors are equipped with the firm's pixel lock algorithm, which provides real-time detection and automation reconnaissance of enemy drone profiles. The algorithm is directly embedded in the interceptor's onboard computers and enables autonomous target locking without the need for a human operator. The X-Wing has already been deployed in real-world interception missions in Ukraine in coordination with the Ukrainian air defense units. Operating mainly at night, it has been used to intercept various models of Shahed drones, which are often deployed in swarms, accompanied by Gerber-type decoys designed to saturate radars. Such missions made it possible to evaluate the interceptor's ability to operate with the direct support of Ukrainian radar networks and to respond autonomously to changing trajectories in jamming and saturation contexts. These experiences provided details on how to refine the onboard algorithms. Meanwhile, a series of tests were also carried out on the site of France's military procurement agency, the DGA, near the southwest town of Biscarrosse. The new models were deployed against Banshee jet-powered target drones produced by British company Modini, which simulated the flight profiles of modified Shahed 238s. The tests confirmed their high-speed interception performance in conjunction with existing radar sensors on the ground. DGA engineers have confirmed the drones may be used as tested. The Alta Ares interceptors have been designed for native integration into the air and missile defense IAMD architecture used by NATO allies. So they've got this centralized system, the Ukrainians, for joining together all of planes and radar planes and air defense systems, and actually that includes Soviet ones as well. NATO ones can plug and play, Soviet ones need a bit of tinkering, but they can all be plugged into this centralized system for defending Ukraine's airspace or defending the whole of Ukraine by using this way of centrally mapping what threats are coming over and therefore what we need to use to shoot these down or intercept them, and where we use that. It's called the IAMDs, something else, lots of letters. I'll try and find actually the infographic that I often use for that. Okay, here it is. AIAMD SOS full architecture. So essentially you have this centralized, and this was only developed relatively recently, and Ukraine got the first one from America back some time ago. So you've got Link 16 linking all your planes and everything together with your centralized hub here. You've got Patriots, you've got all these different air defense systems that are linked together, and essentially it's this architecture that is a kind of plug and play thing that allows everything to talk to everything else, and NATO is kind of utilizing that, or it's something that is being developed for, has been developed for NATO fairly recently. Anyway, Where were we? So the Alta Ares interceptors have been designed for native integration into the air and missile defense IAMD architecture used by NATO allies. Through standardized communication protocols, they can function in direct link with air surveillance radars, be triggered from a command post, or operate autonomously and locally according to tactical configurations. The pixel lock system plays a central role in such capacity for interoperability by facilitating the drone's integration into tactical digital environments without depending on a centralized targeting infrastructure. In other words, that's really good. It all sounds absolutely brilliant, although I am a little confused as to whether these genuinely can take out guided glide bombs, because that's merely the claim here from Null Reports. I don't know if that is a misunderstanding. AI designed to counter guided bombs and aerial threats. So I need to do a little more research on that to see whether it is definitely the case. Anyway, interesting stuff, and Ukraine need as many of those as they can get their hands on, those Shahed drones. If you're not going to blow up Yellow Booga, then you are going to need to shoot down as many of those bloody drones as possible. Okay, German aid to Ukraine. Moving on to Germany now, says the German government has co-financed 200 portable power stations, which have been handed over to Olena Zelenska Foundation by the UNHCR Ukraine. They are intended for foster families in Ukraine to stay warm and connected during power outages, something that's going to be even more required in the coming weeks and months as Ukraine's energy infrastructure is being absolutely hammered. And German aid to Ukraine again reporting on this. And I get this sense that Germany's really good at doing stuff like this from a very local level, like different regions and cities really seem to be helping out Ukraine. Now, it might be that actually many European nations are doing similarly. And it could just be that German aid to Ukraine reports on it more and I read it more. But anyway, it seems that Germany is very good at this. As part of her visit to Ukraine, the German Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Katharina Reiche, handed over 5 German-financed modern emergency rescue and canine vehicles and related equipment, like a set of drones and search equipment, to the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. Although this isn't one of those localized ones, quite often you get German cities or German regions saying, you know, we've raised for these vehicles, and they send a load of vehicles over, and it's really awesome. So good stuff there. Bad news here, though. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico says Slovakia won't give, quote, a single cent for Ukraine's defense. We will not participate with even €1 cent in funding Kiev's military expenses, he declared after a cabinet meeting in Visny. Thanks for that, Fico. As the analyst says, one day Fico is going to feel the pain of his Putin adoration. What else? Bulgaria and European defense giant Rheinmetall sealed a deal worth more than €1 billion, $1.2 billion, to build a plant that will produce gunpowder and 155mm artillery shells, according to Reuters. This surprises me because there are quite a lot of production facilities now, it seems, for artillery ammunition around Europe. America's ramped up production as well, and I would be worried that there might be an overproduction of these. Of course, many nations in Europe will need to refill their stocks, having given an awful lot to Ukraine. But obviously they are banking on that demand still being in place in 5 years' time. Officials said the project was important for Bulgaria and Europe as a whole. So Bulgaria to possibly receive some investment there. Now, production of large caliber projectiles based on a Czech license from CSG has begun in Ukraine. So they're building 105, 120, and 155mm calibers. Some of these will be for tanks and some for just general NATO caliber howitzers, according to the press service. Yeah, so Ukraine under license is building some of these. They already, I think, they already do build projectiles and mortar bombs and different things. So maybe this is another line being started up in Ukraine under the licensing from CSG there. Ukraine's Navy has received additional combat boat 90 vessels. I talked about this the other day, from Sweden and Norway, completing a full division based on this platform. The CB90s are among the world's best fast assault boats, used by many NATO countries for troop landings, coastal defense, patrol, and maritime security operations. So repeating that, but just interesting, it was this part, completing a full division based on this platform. So they're getting, hopefully, I've said this before, that I said this right at the beginning of the war, that with each passing month, And there may be stops and starts here, but generally speaking, the Ukrainians are getting better and better kit and equipment as they're using up their old Soviet assets and replacing them with new Western assets. And the West is, as long as they continue to oblige here and support Ukraine with this equipment, Ukraine's capabilities and capacities appear to be getting better and better, whereas Russia appears to be getting worse and worse. So they were in a better position at the beginning of the war than they are now, Russia, in terms of the troop losses, sheer scale, that expertise, that experience, but also the equipment. They've absolutely churned through a whole bunch of very good equipment. I'm going to speak in a little while about pantsers, actually, because they've lost 48% of their pantsers, something like that, since the beginning of the war, and they're not making enough to replace what they're losing. And yet, Ukraine is, I just think there is this idea that Ukraine is still like improving, like they're in a, not in terms of personnel, both sides have been absolutely hammered in terms of personnel, but in terms of equipment, you think about that AIAMD air defense architecture. You talk about F-16s and Mirage 2005Fs and Gripens and possibly Rafales, right? You're talking about Leopards. You're talking about the Lynx, the Rheinmetall Lynx infantry fighting vehicle that's going to be built in Ukraine now, hopefully. And all of the localized manufacturing, the drones, all sorts. So I think Ukraine is in a better position. The problem is it's not just equipment, it's personnel, and both sides are getting hammered in that domain. Right, the Dutch supplied Iris radar system, so I think this is different from Iris-T, is now giving the Ukrainian army crucial extra minutes to detect and destroy kamikaze drones. So a software upgrade has increased its coverage from 5 kilometers to 12 kilometers, providing early warning of low altitude threats. So that's really good. Just little things like that. Again, it's about improving and improving, just like I was saying in my previous point there. Lithuania is developing an evacuation drone in collaboration with the Ukrainian military. According to iRozhlas, the Lithuanian startup Revolve began working on the airlift U-500 autonomous aerial vehicle back in 2019 amid widespread wildfires in Europe. Interesting. So initially developed to get people trapped in wildfires out of Dodge. This looks a bizarre thing. I'd love to see that take off, actually, but I don't think you do here. It doesn't look like you'd be able to sustain that kind of lift from those mechanisms, but evidently, I'm no drone designer, so what do I know? The European Commission with the participation of NATO and EU member states is introducing a mechanism for the rapid transfer of military equipment in Europe in the event of an armed conflict, according to Financial Times. So I guess this is kind of along the lines of what NATO been planning and trying to not implement, but make sure that there's been for some years this worry that actually if Russia did attack into Europe past Ukraine, that actually if the European armies had to mobilize and get all their kit from, say, Spain, the UK, across France and Germany to Eastern Europe, would the roads be able to handle that equipment? Would the bridges be able to handle the weight? What would happen with airports and planes and shutting down airports to be utilized for so on and so forth? You can't just expect, oh, there's war, right, we'll just react now and everything will be fine, we just move all our kit from A to B. You need to plan, and you need to make sure that your kit can be moved, physically can be moved from A to B within Europe. And so there's long been this worry, or since the beginning of the Ukraine war, really, there's been this worry that actually Europe and NATO would be unable to. So NATO's been onto this, and now it looks like the EU's onto this, worried about what would happen if there was a war in the east of Europe. So initiative involves the creation of transport fleet, ferries, railway platforms, and trucks. In November, the European Commission plans to propose steps to simplify customs procedures and modernize transport infrastructure to ensure this project. The creation of a single fleet of railway wagons and cars within the EU is also being considered, but due to limited budgets, its implementation may be difficult. And then just going back to sort of the implications of orders of planes. So we were talking about Gripen earlier. Talked about the Eurofighter the other day and how Keir Starmer went over to Turkey and they signed a deal on 20 Eurofighters that is really good for British and German and I think is it Spanish manufacturing. Turkey buys a Eurofighter, but the reason why I'm talking about it again because there is some discussion about S-400s in Turkey. So the Turkish government yesterday or the other day signed a deal for 20 Eurofighters with the UK, says the analyst. Another 20 may be ordered later. The deal went through after build partner Germany dropped their objections. So initially, Germany didn't want Turkey to get hold of these. Then they're probably thinking, we need to have manufacturing. So, yep, that's fine, Turkey. It'll be all right. This and other new purchases by the building partners, except the UK, which bought the new F-35A instead, will keep the line open until around 2032 to 2034. Turkey needs the aircraft before its own fifth-generation aircraft is available. So Turkey are doing loads of their own R&D, like Baykar and other companies in Turkey. Turkey's arms industry is really kind of booming at the moment, but it takes a long time to get from scratch to a working piece of kit. They're doing quite a lot of work on autonomous aircraft, sort of actual kind of jet fighters, but pilotless. I think the Turkish. Anyway, they're also looking to buy in older Eurofighters from Qatar and Saudi Arabia. The saga relates to the ejection of Turkey from the F-35 program in 2019 after it bought S-400 systems from Russia. So they were going to be, as a NATO member and with aspirations to join the EU, believe that if you will, Turkey were looking at being involved in the F-35 program, but they got kicked out of that by the United States in 2019 because they bought a bunch of S-400 air defense systems from Russia. So those systems, the problem is if you fly F-35s, an American bit of kit, and then you also have S-400s, a Russian bit of kit, then you can work out yourself how best to shoot down F-35s using S-400s. That is super valuable to the Russians. So completely would understand why buying the S-400s in would be highly controversial for being on the F-35 in the F-35 program. So Americans totally justified in kicking Turkey off that. Now, those systems have never been integrated, though, into Turkey's defenses and sit idly by in storage unused, except for a single test back in 2020. They cost 2.5 billion euros. That's what they cost the country, and they can ill afford to waste them. But Erdogan had to make his point. Since then, Russia has asked to buy them back in the past couple of months, offering gas and oil in exchange. So Russia really desperately need these. NATO allies want Turkey to give them to Ukraine, which would upset Russia severely and risk Turkey's energy dependence on Russian sources. Nobody, not even Ankara, not even the Turkish, seem keen to give them to Russia, given that Turkey is not keen on Russia's involvement and occupation of Crimea. However, rumors persist that they have let the US and Ukrainian technicians examine the system, which they obviously deny. So the S-400 saga continues, a dilemma Erdogan probably wished he didn't have to deal with. It's a lose-lose. Yeah, they're in a tough position. I don't know why they initially bought the S-400, what that was, what the reason was for Erdogan there, but goodness me, it'd be great if the Ukrainians could get hold of those systems that the Turkish have. Yeah. So going on to Ukrainian indigenous manufacturing and procurement, almost 100,000 drones in 3 months. How Ukraine is increasing its technical advantage. This is something I wonder about all the time, which is who is building and procuring the most drones, the Ukrainians or the Russians? What type of drones? It can be that the Russians produce or procure more fiber optic drones and that the Ukrainians have more FPV drones, etc., etc. According to the MOD, 50 more brigades are joining the marketplace. So this is that marketplace where you can get equipment, and that's 100. There's like an Amazon for weapons, essentially, and thus 180 units are already working through the system. Quite in 3 months, almost 100,000 drones worth 3.74 billion hryvnias have been delivered to the army through the DOT chain defense. The average delivery time for equipment from stock is only 10 days, the ministry noted. So they've really kind of ramped up the ability for units to procure, to buy, to get kit like drones, to have marketplaces, online marketplaces where they can just really easily do that. They're just obviously modernizing quite a lot. Now, Militiani are reporting that Ukraine has presented the FA version 1 unmanned fighter at the summit in the Philippines. It is capable of speeds of over 250 kilometers an hour, with a flight range of 30 kilometers, a ceiling of 5,000 meters, and a radius of detection of air targets of up to 15 kilometers. So, yeah, it is not a jet. Someone says 30-kilometer range. Is that a typo? Someone else says, I Googled it. That is the range. It's quite small and remotely operated. The use case for rapid frontline deployment for a specific threat. So assume it doesn't need a long runway, maybe roads, and then returns. Yeah, so let's have a look at what someone else has found. So the FA V1 is a new jet-powered unmanned fighter concept unveiled by Ukraine in October. It is a compact drone designed for short-range airspace defense, reflecting Ukraine's experience and expanding expertise in autonomous systems. The key specification and features are performance. It's designed for a top speed exceeding 250 kilometers an hour, about 155 miles an hour, and a flight ceiling of 5,000 meters. It features a compact twin-tail design similar to other small-scale unmanned aerial vehicles under development globally. The drone has an operational range of 30 kilometers, about 18.6 miles, and a detection range of up to 15 kilometers for aerial targets. Its capabilities include reconnaissance and potential combat applications, likely utilizing optical targeting with artificial intelligence and machine learning methods. Ukrainian officials revealed the concept in the Drone Warfare Summit in the Philippines. The FAV1 can be seen as both a prototype for an anti-aircraft drone and as a baseline example for tactical drone fighters developed in response to the ongoing conflict and increasing use of drone technologies. Is not related to the German V1 flying bomb, of course. There you go. So that is a little bit more information on this potential newbie that you might see in Ukrainian skies at some point soon-ish. China is reducing the supply of components for Ukrainian drones, according to NTV. Beijing is increasingly restricting such supplies and is also stopping attempts by the Ukrainian defense industry to import Chinese electronic components through allied countries. So a bit like Russia gets stuff imported from the EU or the US or wherever from, through Kyrgyzstan or wherever, that China is clamping down on Ukraine's ability to get components from China. This is a real challenge for Ukraine. The engines, batteries, and flight controllers for drones used by the armed forces of Ukraine are mainly supplied from China. There's only one drone, I think, that's entirely Ukrainian made, and all the components on board are Ukrainian. But it's obviously not going to be price competitive. It's something Ukraine is going to be working on, but they need China. If China are clamping down, it's a huge, huge threat. Ukraine is now producing 120mm tank shells for Leopard 2 and Abrams with Czech support. So we talked about that earlier. This is in the Ukraine section. The new facility handles body production, filling, testing, and final assembly. CSG supplies the detonators and other parts. So it's not entirely built in Ukraine, but mainly built these shells. So that's good news. Now, this is just kind of hot off the press today, just in the last hour, actually. Ukraine's Flamingo cruise missiles have been used in real operations 9 times, and they're now considered the best in Ukraine's arsenal, according to Le Figaro, citing Zelensky. So it's a French newspaper citing Zelensky. The next step being prepared is launching domestic ballistic missile production. Wow. Okay. So good news. They are working on ballistic missiles. Good news is that they have been used a number of times, these Flamingos, and they appear to be doing all right. They are seen as the best in Ukraine's arsenal. Now, in comparable weapons, there probably isn't a very big arsenal there of what you can use. I guess Neptune, Chrom 2, Yeah, and the flamingos here. So Zelensky, Ukrainian forces will now this, fresh out as a claim here. This is the sort of stuff that gets me excited. But we've heard this before. But for me, this is the key to the entire war: is Ukraine's ability to smash things up at a distance and do it at scale. They need to destroy Yellow Buga. I keep talking about that. They need to destroy refineries. They need to destroy the military industrial complex at large. They need to destroy rail infrastructure. They need to destroy all sorts of different things, chemicals factories, so on and so forth. And they need to be firing into Russia at least what Russia is firing into Ukraine. So when Russia fires 650 odd missiles and 650 drones and then 50 odd missiles the other night, if Ukraine are going to prevail in this war, they need to be doing at least what Russia is doing there. There needs to be a massive scaling up. And I shouldn't be excited about war and destruction, right? I'm excited about Ukraine prevailing, right? That's to me what I dream of every day. And I'm invested in just hugely in Ukraine prevailing here. But to prevail, they've got to be hammering Russia with 100 missiles a night, 650 drones a night. That scale has to be there, and Russia will suffer and capitulate. That would be, what I'd like to see. So Zelensky saying again today that Ukrainian forces will soon carry out long-range strikes on targets inside Russia. Well, they're already doing that, but what I guess he means is that you're going to see a categorical shift. We've identified the objectives together with the heads of the SBU and the foreign intelligence, he said. I mean, let's go. Let's hope that we do genuinely see that. Right, moving on to Russia. Poor quality Chinese-made lithium batteries for drones are exploding in frontline dugouts, endangering their occupants, according to a Russian war blogger. He highlights Russia's failure to find viable alternatives to Chinese components of dubious quality. Platon Mamatov writes, quote, "I won't delve into the depths and abysses of import substitution, the agony of choosing between a domestic drone that doesn't fly at all and something assembled from Chinese components that somehow works, or other pressing issues of our time. Instead, I'll give a very simple example of my personal biography. Look, there's a dugout. 6 people are sitting in a dugout, husbands of their wives, fathers of their children, sons of their parents. Valuable military specialists, each with a personal cemetery behind them, and the dugout is also full of explosives, flammable materials, and materials that emit toxic substances when burned. Accordingly, any fire in a dugout means a choice between suffocating in toxic chemical smoke, then burning, or burning, then exploding. This dugout also charges lithium polymer high voltage batteries for attack drones. Chinese, of course. There are simply no other batteries in the Russian army, no matter what the stickers say. We have old style batteries. We've been using them for years, and we have new style batteries. They've only recently started including them in drone boxes. The new style batteries, when charged above 4.35 volts per cell, have a nasty habit of spontaneously combusting. They emit a bright chemical flame that can't be extinguished by water or by cutting off the oxygen supply to the combustion source. Wow. We were extremely lucky that one of the batteries caught fire before we went to bed. It swelled before the flash, giving me 5 seconds to throw it outside. We also had the good sense to take the remaining new style batteries outside and carefully place them in the shell craters, to discover in the morning that every single one of them had spontaneously caught fire overnight. So now we choose between charging the batteries to 4.35 and not reaching the required striking range, and charging as usual and burning up along with all the junk. And it's not good that we have a choice, yeah? What am I talking about? Oh, yeah, it's clear that our beloved motherland hasn't solved the problem of establishing mass production of cheap batteries in 4 years of war, and is unlikely to solve it in the foreseeable future. It's clear that the army's need for batteries is enormous and constantly growing, more precisely 2 armies. The Ukrainians also buy from China, and the supplier covers these needs with products of increasingly questionable quality. But can we please not buy such outright fire hazardous crap? It's quite a shame to repeatedly dodge bullets, shell fragments, mines, and firebombs only to die because a battery then blew up at the wrong time. that's all I wanted to say about the prospects of our import substitution in domestic drone manufacturing. We'll talk about motors, video cameras, and the quality of the real housings next time, if we live that long. Oof. So that's a pretty damning indictment there. But I wonder whether that's equally a problem for the Ukrainians. Yeah, that is exactly the same for them. I don't know. I've not heard it, but I would imagine it would be. And we're hearing today, I've reported this on my hits and losses video, that a new missile that pushed Trump to leave a nuclear treaty fired by Russia at Ukraine has been fired by Russia at Ukraine quite a few times as well. Is it 23 times since August 1st or something like that? So Russia's 9M729 ground-launched cruise missile was recorded flying as far as 1,200 kilometers, which is above the 500-kilometer limit that's supposed to be set for missiles that mean that, you know, if you are producing them, then, you know, there are certain treaties that Russia and the US were bound by. And this is what pulled this particular missile, the 9M729, was what made Trump's America pull out of the treaty in 2019. And actually, they've used this missile 23 times, I believe, since the 1st of August. So, yeah, that's a bit of a challenge for the Ukrainians. And actually, we're hearing that, and I don't know whether this is the missile or the missile system, because I've heard both claims. But if you remember the Oreshnik missile system, which is this new, scare quotes, new missile that they were using, then they had a cluster variant, or it wasn't cluster, it's submunition variants that, you know, the missile goes over and then it lets out, I don't know, something like 6 other kind of missile things. And they did that over Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. But those submunitions weren't like, they were duds purposefully, but it was kind of a shot across the bow for the Ukrainians, and it was all this saber rattling over. Was it over the time when they received the permission to fire ATACMS into Russia? We hear that Ukraine has shot down or blown up one of 3 of these missiles, which can be interpreted as they've sent over time, because we heard about another Oreshnik being used as well. And this can either be interpreted as 3 missiles have been sent over and 1 was actually shot down by the Ukrainians, or I've seen the other claim that the missile system itself, like the launch system, they've got 3 of them for these missiles, and one of the systems was blown up, or one of these missiles was blown up, you know, at a launch site. So there are many different claims concerning this, but I'll try and I've got that in for my hits and losses tomorrow. I'll talk about it then, but I don't know if there will be any more clarity then. Anyway, I thought I'd throw that in now. And then finally, this, I referenced this earlier. This is Vasyl Malyuk, who's quite well regarded. He is one of the guys that was behind the Spiderweb project, and I think was he behind the Crimean Kerch Bridge explosion as well. Anyway, Ukraine, he says, has destroyed 48% of Russia's Pantsir air defense systems since the start of the war, of the year, according to SPU chief Vasyl Malyuk. Despite producing around 30 per year, Russia is losing them faster than it can replace them. So it can actually build a fair number of these a year, which is slightly worrying. I have wondered for some time what their air defense system manufacturing capacity is. Looks fairly okay. 30 Pantsirs is pretty decent. But they're losing them at a higher clip than that. So that is a real challenge for the Russians there, which is that's good news. I'd like to hear that. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you very much. Hopefully that was of interest and useful. Take care, and I will speak to you guys soon. In the meantime, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. If you haven't subscribed, it'd be really helpful. Press the bell, and then once you've pressed the bell, click on it again, and make sure you have all for the personalized, rather than, I don't know, whatever the options are. Click on the all bit, and I think you'll get notifications more properly. Anyway, thanks again. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.